I'm part of what the New York Times referred to as an audacious project. When we announced this project in October of last year, we commanded enormous attention for offshore wind, but it is a plan to build a subsea interstate highway for transmission for offshore wind. And I'm going to talk about cost a little bit, as you did, Bonnie. And I just encourage all of you to think about not just the top line cost of offshore wind, but I'm going to talk about the benefits that accrue as a result of offshore wind and a backbone transmission system like this. But in case you can't tell, this ultimately will run from northern New Jersey in a 10-year plan that will ultimately go down to southern Virginia. Now, you've seen this photograph before, a satellite picture showing where the resources are, and obviously, as Maya said, they're heavy off the East Coast. Some 20% of our population is off the East Coast. And you see the tremendous resources, not only in the Northeast, but in the Mid-Atlantic, where we're working to build this line. It is a 10-year plan. It's unusual for a private sector company to propose something that's going to take 10, 12 years, but I think that's one of the strengths of what we're doing, because this is going to have to be built in phases. There isn't the technology or the cable, there's the technology, but not the cable available to do this all at once, even if you wanted to. But ultimately, it will enable up to 7,000 megawatts of offshore wind to be developed in this 10-year period. And the environmental benefits, and I frequently say this in presentations, regardless of whether or not you think that we have global warming, whether or not that's man-caused or just a natural phenomena of nature, we all know about the cycles of nature. Doesn't it make sense to do something that will remove 16 million tons of carbon? And removing 16 million tons of carbon from the air is like taking 3 million cars off the road every year. So this is not an insignificant event. This is buildable. If we were going to try to build this on land, we'd have thousands of landholders here. We have one. It's the agency Bonnie referred to, the bomber. And as I say, you got to look at not only the high cost of offshore wind, but what are the benefits that accrue as a result of that. And I'll show you at the end of this presentation, unless John pulls me off the stage before I get to it, that there's some $43 billion of benefits, and it's going to cost for 7,000 megawatts of offshore wind, and for the backbone, about $30 billion, so there's a net benefit of some $13 billion. And this is a private sector venture. A professor at the University of Delaware, Willett Kempton, did a study that showed that if you connect several wind farms to a backbone transmission line, that this variability collapses, not solid as you see in the bottom line, but collapses so that there's pretty much a steady flow of electricity that will be on the line. We talked about impact, and one of the things that's great about offshore wind, I refer to it as the risk-free energy source. Every other energy source that we know of has risk, but what's the risk of offshore wind? Maybe during construction, the pounding of the piles, I'll give it that. All of us have maybe been around new construction where there's pile driving, and certainly it is loud. But that short-term cost of energy is going to go up over time, and the fact that the wind is fuel-free is going to stabilize prices over the long term. And reliability is going to be significantly impacted by the fact that this backbone line is going to be connected to the grid in various places. So reliability is going to be significantly benefited. I'm talking about the Mid-Atlantic. I know some of you are Maine and other areas, but we have a problem, and the DOE under Bush studied congestion, and the PJM had just released in a report on Thursday that the congestion within PJM is even greater than what they'd anticipated. And why is this brown area, which represents the congested, transmission congested areas, as much here as any place else in the country except one small area in Los Angeles area? We have power largely coming from the Ohio Valley in Pennsylvania coming east. And on the congestion that is caused from that, when the load is all over here along the coastline, means that there is a hidden tax on the ratepayers in this area. And in Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey, that hidden cost is about, it ranges between $1 billion and $2 billion a year that is paid just because of congestion. Well, when you build wind farms out on in the ocean, and you're moving power from east to west, you lower that congestion, and it helps remove a large portion of that $1 billion to $2 billion hidden tax that I'm talking about. The other thing that we just concluded internally is that there is a coincidence between Midwest wind and offshore wind. Coincident meaning that when the wind's blowing in one area, it is not blowing so much in another. One of the interesting characteristics about offshore wind is that it blows during the day when the most power is needed. Midwest wind is largely blowing at night, and that raises issues of storage and so on and so forth. So, what this means is that if you build 31,000 megawatts of onshore wind, which is what PJM is planning for, you are going to need as much as 17,000 megawatts of backup generation to address the issue of flexibility, or variability, excuse me. And if you put 7,000 megawatts of offshore wind in the ocean and send that to the west, you now remove the need for 4,600 megawatts of generation to support that variability. And if you had to build that 4,600 megawatts of new generation, you would be spending well over $4 billion to make that connection. So again, don't just look at the top cost of offshore wind. The economic development that's going to accrue is going to be terrific. How many other opportunities do these states have to generate an entirely new industry? And if we can get commitment to build a backbone, if we can demonstrate to manufacturers that there's going to be a sustainability of the development of the cables for our backbone, the turbines for the wind farms, we're going to see manufacturers from Europe coming over and developing wind turbines here, and we have some homegrown companies as well. And our studies show that if you can build these facilities in the United States, you lower the cost by 20%. So if you take that 20% and add it to the fact that there's a learning curve and the price comes down as you build more and more, it becomes a really attractive story.